Duke basketball is back. A win over Jacksonville to officially start the Jon Scheyer era. What a win it was for the Blue Devils. What a performance it was from guys like Mark Mitchell and Jeremy Roach. Let's break it all down here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Time for some fun.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, and it's so great to have you here with us on today's show. Locked On Blue Devils is a daily podcast devoted to everything going on in the life of Duke athletics, and we appreciate you making us your first listen or first watch each and every day. Locked On Blue Devils is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Sling TV. Sling has something for everyone, especially when it comes to college football coverage. With a massive lineup of games across the ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12, and SEC, I can always catch the games I want on Sling, and now you can too. Check out Sling TV now to see the massive lineup of games they have all season long. Sling, the TV you love for a price you'll love. Try it today. As we get set to open up today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, we're going to talk a lot about Duke's win over Jacksonville to open up the season. The Blue Devils are now 1-0 on the year, and I'm really excited to bring on my good friend Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated to talk about everything. If you haven't done so already, be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast for free wherever you get them. You can follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_, and also watch the show each and every day on YouTube. Subscribe there for us as well. Your support means the absolute world. So now, without further ado, let's bring in Conor O'Neill. And Conor, it's so good to see you once again, as always. And it's even better to know that on today's show, we've actually got a game result that actually counts towards stats and records and that sort of thing to break it all down. Thanks for being on the show today, man.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's nice to we don't have to talk about the box score from the Houston closed door that nobody was supposed to have, and we don't have to talk about an exhibition game that, you know, it counts and then it doesn't count when the season actually starts. So, yeah.
It's good. It's good. And we were able to see Duke take on Jacksonville on Monday night. It was the first game Jon Scheyer takes over the program as the head coach for the first time in 42 years. Mike Krzyzewski was not the head coach that walked out of the tunnel and made his way toward the bench inside Cameron Indoor Stadium. I want to start there, Conor, as someone who covers Duke athletics and who gets to be at so many games there inside that venue. What was that moment like when it was Jon Scheyer that walked out and was introduced as the head coach officially?
You know, I think for John, it was such an anticipated moment that he just tried to soak it in a little bit. I think there's also, you know, I think there's some relief that comes with that because, you know, this transition was announced, 17, 18 months prior. It was a feeling of finally reaching a finish line. And that's kind of weird to say, given he's 1-0 in his career as Duke's head coach. Like you think that this is the starting point, but just this transition period feels like it's finally reached its last step, its last gasp. And I noticed John, not when he came out for the first time, but when he came back out at halftime, he walked past the press row and where the crazies are hanging over press row. And I thought I caught him saying, "I appreciate you. Thank you to the crazies," as he was walking past them. And I think that meant a lot. After the game, he talked about how he's basically grown up in Cameron. Like, he's a kid from Chicago that came to Duke and played at Duke, obviously won a national championship at Duke and has been an assistant coach at Duke. So it's a natural journey for him to be at this point right now. And so I think there was a lot of soaking in of the moment, and also wanting to kind of move past this first one, get it out of the way, get it into the books, and now move forward.
No doubt, and we will move forward with Jon Scheyer as the head coach of Duke men's basketball. Super exciting to see what he's going to be able to do with this program. And you're right, it does feel like the moment kind of came to a close, which is so weird to say because the season is just now starting. But you add into the timeline that we've known about this for over a year, that it was prior to last year that we got the news that Jon Scheyer would take the seat from Mike Krzyzewski. And so because we've known so long, it's drug out this transition period, as you worded it. And and here we are. Now we know that he's the head coach. Now it won't be as weird, I don't think. We'll have bigger moments with Jon Scheyer on the sidelines. The Duke and UNC games will have a totally different feel. Not having Coach K on one side, not having Roy Williams or Dean Smith on the other. We move forward into a new stage of Duke and basketball and that sort of thing. So on the floor, Duke has their first game of the season. And what stood out to you from the game? Big picture.
Well, everything that they said about the defense being a focal point of this team and emphasized really shows up when you only give up 44 points. And one of the many areas that I locked in watching was Kevion Nolan. It was a really good guard for Jacksonville last year, and that was a 21-win team. I think they were 1 win away from being an NCAA tournament team. Jeremy Roach and even Mark Mitchell at one point was guarding him. I think Proctor was on to him at times as the primary defender. Kevion Nolan, I think, was 1 for 9 with 5 points. Like, they really did a nice job of taking him out of the game, and that's Jacksonville's best player. Sticking with the defense, I mean, I wrote about this. The cheating aspect of it is I had about 450 words written going into the game, and then watching Mark Mitchell play defense and watching him switch onto, like I said, he was on Kevion Nolan, who's a 6'2", 6'3" quick guard, and then he's guarding big men. He's playing the 4. He never got to play the 5. That was a lineup that John threw out there in the exhibition game for the last 3 minutes of the first half, just to see if Mark could handle that. And so I wrote a story yesterday about how his defensive versatility is just going to make things so much. It's going to play such a role. Even when Derek Lively and Dariq Whitehead come back, like, Mark Mitchell is going to be a key cog for this team defensively. And that's something that, I don't know how many people really saw that coming. Like, Maybe it's just me, but when you tell me that a kid is a 5-star, I immediately think like he's going to be a bona fide scorer, and he's got a little ways to go defensively. And man, Mark is a different cat mindset wise. Like, he wants to go out there and lock you down defensively. He was Duke's leading scorer with 18 points. Like, you'll take that. You'll take 2 threes from him as many games as you can get them. But he'll play a huge role defensively for this team.
18 points on the night for Mark Mitchell, including a couple of makes from 3-point range, which was big for the Duke Blue Devils. We've got more individual performances to talk about in Duke's season opening win against Jacksonville. We'll do that in just a moment here on Locked On Blue Devils. Today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by SimpliSafe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Blue Devil listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you don't want to miss it. SimpliSafe has been named the best home security of 2022 by U.S. World News Report, a 3rd year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use fast product technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real, so you can get priority police response. With the top-rated SimpliSafe app, stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere. Arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe at simplisafe.com/lockedoncollege. This is the biggest discount of the year. So don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, I'm JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. Duke basketball is now 1-0 on the year after their victory against Jacksonville. They win by a score of 71-44. We talked about Mark Mitchell's performance, 18 points on the night, a couple of makes from three-point range. And then, Conor, so many people wanted to see Jeremy Roach back in action. Talk to me about Roach's performance.
Yeah, it felt so steady. His defense was there, his leadership was there. All 16 points came in the first half, and it was a really fun exchange. I think it was Tyrese Proctor shot a three. Duke didn't go 2 for 1, which was one of the few subtle things that, Coach K would have been a little perturbed by. So Duke had a chance to go 2 for 1 and didn't. Tyrese Proctor takes a three, and Duke gets an offensive rebound with less than 20 seconds, so there's no shot clock. And Jeremy launches a three from the top of the key with 14 seconds left, and it's like, man, you better make that. And he did. Like, it was his 4-3 of the half. He made it, and they came down and got a stop, and Shire went to Roach immediately when they came onto the court, and like, there was a little bit of Cheshire Cat grinning going on with Jeremy, and Jeremy told us afterward, like John said, you better have made it. If you were going to shoot that, you better have made that shot. So their relationship is really good. And yeah, you might, if you want to get hung up on a nitpick that Jeremy didn't score in the second half, you can. Like, that's something that, when somebody has 16 points, you don't automatically assume they're going to get to 30, but you'd at least like to see him score once in the second half. I don't even buy that that's a big deal. He didn't need to be scoring in the second half. Kyle Filipowski got going a little bit. Mark Mitchell had, I think, 7 of his 18 in the second half. And Ryan Young got going in the second half. So everything was there for Jeremy that you want to see throughout the season. And John afterwards said something about he really set the tone for Duke, especially on the defensive end. And that carried over certainly in the second half.
Love seeing Jeremy Roach at the point once again. Felt so confident and comfortable in his junior season now. He's used to everything that comes with being a Duke men's basketball player, and you can certainly see it. Yeah, you see 16 points, and then you find out all of them were in the first half, like we're saying. Not much scoring from him in the second half, and yet Duke was still able to win. Again, the final score, 71-44, and the defense is something so important to point out for this bunch with what Duke was able to accomplish. Let's go inside to the bigs. Kyle Filipowski, Ryan Young, both of those guys make their debut in the Duke uniforms. Ryan Young did not miss a single shot. Kyle Filipowski made a couple of shots from three-point range as well. The bigs seem to be impressive in their debut.
Yeah, I thought Filipowski and Proctor really had that deer in the headlights first game look to them early. And Filipowski, with about a little more than a minute left in the first half, again, Jeremy Roach setting the tone. He set him up for a top of the key three on a secondary break, and Filipowski made it. And you could just see the relief come over him. You could see the kind of deep breath. I equated it. Wendell was going through a struggle last year and was really had some shooting woes for a couple games, and then he finally hit one, and I watched him go back on defense, and it just looked like all the pent up emotion had drained from his body. It was so crazy to see, and I had fun talking to him about that last year. I thought the same thing with Filipowski, and he said after the game he kind of confirmed that, that he was going a little too fast, and hitting that shot just seemed to bring everything to about half speed. From where he was going in the first few minutes of the game. And that was huge. And then, man, Ryan Young, I mean, it's going to be so easy to make the old man at the YMCA jokes this year, but it's not without validation. Like, he's so fundamental. He's going to hit you with a million different pivots and drop steps, and He can score over both shoulders, as John said after the game. He brings so much to the table. It's such a different feeling from what we think Derek Lively is going to bring to the table, with being a 7-1 guy who's a rim runner and a rim protector and can maybe make some threes for you on the outside and can cut, all the different stuff Derek Lively can do. That's not what Ryan Young is going to do. And maybe that's a good thing. Like maybe we're still in football season here, so I can talk about having running backs that, sometimes you need change of pace backs.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't need to have 4 water bugs in your backfield. Sometimes you need that pound and grind guy. And I think that's more of what Ryan Young brings to the table. And so it was really encouraging to see him kind of go to work there. I want to say at least 4 of his baskets came in the second half, maybe 5 of them. Like I really felt like he got going in the second half there too. And that was, again, that was really encouraging to see him have that kind of impact early in his Duke career.
The Duke Blue Devils are 1-0 on the season after a 71-44 win against Jacksonville, coming up on Friday, their second game of the season when they take on South Carolina upstate. Let's talk a little bit more about some individual performances and what's next for Duke basketball, and we'll do that in just a moment here on Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils today is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar's got new reimagined flavors that I need to tell you about. Cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper are 3 of the newest ones. White chocolate peppermint granola is Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more fulfilling and still insanely tasty. And candy cane brownie puff. Built Puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. It is so good. They're revolutionizing nutrition as we know it with 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and low sugar and calories. Only 130 calories. It's just absolutely amazing. Built, you've got to try this. Get 15% off your order right now by using the code LOCKEDON15. 15% off your order right now by using the code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. Final few moments here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. Conor, I want to talk about your work with Devils Illustrated for a moment. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on. You did mention that football season is still moving forward. Duke football is now bowl eligible in year 1 of the Mike Elko era. So you're a professional juggler these time of years with the coverage you've got back and forth.
Yeah, it was unfortunate circumstances, but it was a little easier to juggle things last year when Duke football was really kind of tank.
Yeah, no doubt.
But yeah, I'll be at the Virginia Tech Duke game. It's Duke's first home game in about a month, which is a weird little scheduling quirk with road games and the off weekend there. And they're playing a pretty bad Virginia Tech team, so that's coverage coming up. I'll be at Friday night's game for Duke USC Upstate. It's a busy week. It's a busy time of year, but I always try to remind myself as often as possible it's better to be busy than not.
What can people find at Devils Illustrated? Tell us a little bit about some of the stories that you've got.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that would help. So like I said, I wrote a feature about Mark Mitchell. I had fun talking to Mark both after the exhibition game and after the opener against Jacksonville. His nickname is Easy because he was so easy to take care of as a baby. A story off of the opening game, of course. John Shire taking it all in before the game, and a story on the football team up there too, kind of showing that the November win. This team hadn't won a game in November since 2019 when Quentin Harris was the quarterback. Really shows how far Duke has come in such a short amount of time under Mike Elko.
No doubt. That's crazy stuff. Check it all out. Devils Illustrated, a part of the Rivals community. Make sure you subscribe as well. Conor O'Neill here with us on today's show. All right, Conor, let's keep talking Duke basketball for a moment as we move forward and kind of transition into our final parts here of today's discussion. A big win for Duke against Jacksonville, 71-44. We've talked about Mark Mitchell's play, a team-high 18 points for the Blue Devils. Jeremy Roach had 16 solid performances on the inside from Ryan Young and Kyle Filipowski What about those secondary guards? When you think about Tyrese Proctor making his collegiate debut, you mentioned sort of that deer in the headlights look for Proctor and a really tough night shooting from the floor for him. And then Jalen Blakes, the sophomore, who people were curious what kind of a role he would have this season. He really stepped up to the plate. So those two guys in particular.
Yeah, like I said with Proctor, I mean, he looked like he was a little overwhelmed in the moment. It's not totally unexpected. It was a little surprising given how calm and smooth he looked in countdown and in the exhibition game. But that's a team on team scrimmage, and it's an exhibition against the D2. It's going to be harder when you play in D1 teams, and the moment's going to be bigger when you're playing a season opener. So I don't think there's much to be concerned about. If it persists for a few games, they'll certainly need him to play well against Kansas in a week. But right now, I think you're still, you can survive. Obviously, you survive with a 27-point win. Jalen Blakes, I mean, I asked John Shire about Jalen at the end of the press conference, and I think the word he used was pit bull. To describe him, he basically said the 3-pointers were a bonus with Jalen. His role is just going to be lockdown defender. He's, I think, listed at 6'2" or 6'3". I'd be really curious what his wingspan is. His arms seem to be pretty long, and he might be getting to a 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" wingspan. We always just talk about that with the guys that are tall, right? We talk about that with like Mark Mitchell. I think has more than a 7-foot wingspan, and that's why he's so versatile defensively. But Jalen Blakes is going to help this team. He's and the shooting, like I know John said it was a bonus, but there were a lot of halftimes last year that I found myself just kind of absent-mindedly watching Jalen Blakes in warmups, and that shot was tough to watch. Like it was a weird release. He had kind of a quirky.
You're exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was semi-painful to watch. And man, he got in the lab after the season ended, and he worked on that thing. Had to be just about nonstop since last season ended, because it's not like he doesn't look like Klay Thompson out there. I don't know if that's ever going to be him, but it's a workable shot for a college basketball player. And to get to that point from where he was last year is so impressive to me. And it gives him a role on this team. It gives him a niche. And again, I talk about, Mark Mitchell probably is going to be a valuable piece for this team, even when the injured guys come back. Jalen Blakes, I mean, he's not getting his minutes aren't going to decrease when Dariq Whitehead or Derek Lively come back. I would think. Now, I don't know, you've got I'm looking here, 13 minutes. That might be a little much. I might walk that back a little bit. He might be more of an 8 to 10 minute guy. But he's going to have a role, which is a development that this team kind of needed going into the season. Like, they had to go out and get Jacob Grandison because they weren't sure that Jalen Blakes was going to be able to fill that role. And this is not to say that, Grandison is not all of a sudden not going to have a role because Jalen Blakes is capable. It's just they're fitting some pieces, and they got some growth in areas that they really needed to have growth to reach their ceiling this year.
Locked On Blue Devils here today talking about the Duke basketball win. If you're watching us on YouTube, we do have the box score added bonus here for you to take a look at. And Jalen Blakes, again, 8 points in his debut, or sophomore debut, I should say, for Duke men's basketball. Terrific effort for him. A Duke team that knocked down 10 3-point shots from the outside. But Conor, as we sort of wrap up and move forward with Duke, they've got the game coming up on Friday against South Carolina Upstate. And then looming we're now less than a week away from their big showdown with Kansas in the Champions Classic in Indianapolis. And Derek Lively II did not play for Duke in the season opener against Jacksonville. Some folks thought that maybe he'd be able to give it a go. Still waiting on Dariq Whitehead as well to make his debut. So I think the health is another big thing that people want to factor in with this Duke squad.
Yeah, John said after the game that there's I think he used the term really good shot that Derek plays against USC Upstate. Dariq, the big news with Tariq is that he's finally been cleared for contact. That's a step. That's not a step that, you get cleared for contact and all of a sudden you're back within a week. So I think it might be until PK 85 until we see Tariq. Derek, I think we see, if not on Friday night, I think we could see him against Kansas. I don't know if you want your freshman big man to be making a season debut on that stage, but it's not like he'd be the first Duke freshman to have to debut in the Champions Classic, with that thing being the season opener for the last
Right. That's what I was going to. In years past, we've seen it many times, for sure. We'll see, and looking forward to the game as always. Conor, thank you so much for the time here, and I can't wait to chat with you again on Locked On Blue Devils, my friend.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, JJ.
That is Conor O'Neill, and he's joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Always appreciate his coverage and insight of all things Duke athletics. Do yourself a favor and follow the Devils Illustrated coverage for Duke. As we wrap up today's episode of the program, we'll be back later in the week to continue to get you set for what's next for Duke men's basketball ahead of that massive Champions Classic game. Follow us on Twitter at @LO_Blue Devils. I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Make sure you also check out our Locked On Blue Devils YouTube page. Subscribe there as well. If you're listening on the Apple Podcast platform, we'd love a 5-star rating and review. That's going to do it for today's episode. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.